Joining me is the former Naval Intelligence Commander, Paul Chabot. Welcome back, sir.
Sir, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
President Trump said he got a call from Vladimir Putin this week asking if he wanted to help with Iran's enriched uranium. No thanks was the answer. The president told Putin he'd rather have him in the war in Ukraine instead. Do you think Putin was trying to get his hands on their enriched uranium so he could save it for them and give it back years down the road?
Yeah, Putin knows that we're not going to respond favorably to that kind of a negotiation tactic. Russia's in a world of their own pain right now, where Ukraine is largely independent on their drone creation, targeting Russia, and Russia's no longer getting drones that are coming from Iran. So Russia's in a bad position, and right now the United States is leading the way, and the Iran military leadership is in significant disarray.
There was another interesting exchange this week. The German chancellor said that he thought Iran was, in a quote, humiliating the United States by negotiating hard and dragging out the war. President Trump shot back and told him that he's considering cutting the number of American troops in Germany. How do you see this playing out?
You know, to hear a fellow ally in Germany, especially one that knows what occupation looks like, is very disheartening, because that is bulletin board material for our adversaries. And we all have the same enemy. Nobody wants to see a nuclear Iran. And if anyone, Germany should be more concerned than the United States. Iran's already shown the capability to launch ballistic missiles, reaching our bases in Diego Garcia, which means their trajectory right now could reach most of Europe with nuclear capability in the near future if we fail as a world to disarm enriched uranium from Iran.
Well, President Trump wants to end the war with Iran as soon as possible. And he's got one eye on the midterms as well. But he also doesn't want to be clearing mines in the Strait of Hormuz and playing gatekeeper for who goes in and out of it. How do you see that being resolved?
The Strait of Hormuz is the biggest linchpin in this entire conflict, secondary only to making sure that Iran does not have enriched uranium, which, by the way, they are already at 60%, weeks away from that, to 90% to potentially have the capability for true nuclear weapons. The Strait of Hormuz is international waters, about 21 miles. And so the concern here is that Iran is going to try to force a negotiation, which they have already, and we're going to deny it, in allowing them to have any control over a strait. That would be horrible for the free world, and it's nothing that we should accept. And I know Trump today has announced a particular mechanism going forward to our allies for consideration for opening up the strait.
Well, Iran's leadership is clearly broken down, but those who remain in place still have that instinct to resist, acting like they still hold some cards. Some military experts are saying that the U.S. should finish them off and take Karg Island. What do you think?
So Iran really has four sort of main leaders right now. Their Ayatollah, remember we killed the father about 8-9 weeks ago. His son took over. We hadn't heard from his son. Same last name, Khamenei, recently spoke today, basically very defiant. They have a president who is largely in charge of administrative day-to-day options. Their foreign minister has traveled to Oman and to Russia recently. I see him more as the peace negotiator. But remember, you also have the Revolutionary Guard, which is very hard to the right, very aligned with Soleimani, which is not going to give up. And so we're going to see some internal turmoil. Karg Island is fascinating because 90% of Iran's oil is stored there. They are at capacity. We have 2 Marine Expeditionary Units in theater, which could take that island as well as others for control. But we got to watch, because the next 5, 6, 7, 8 days, the economic turmoil in Iran is going to continue to build up, as well as their oil capacity for holding oil is going to evaporate, which means their wells are going to go into long-term shutdown and significant economic turmoil for Iran going forward.
Paul, what about NATO? Do you think they'll provide any meaningful help with the Strait of Hormuz?
I think NATO really has to. With the Strait of Hormuz, when we think about this, certainly the United States is energy independent, but 20% of the world's oil flows through the strait, as well as commercial products, and in particular, fertilizer. A lot of Europe depends, obviously, not just on oil and natural gas, but also fertilizer, as we do as well. as this goes forward, the world needs to unite to ensure that Iran does not push forward with their number one agenda, which is to control the Strait of Hormuz. With technology, minesweepers, our drone capability in the water for disarming, and we do see some allies talking about sending some ships that can do mine clearing. I think we're in the beginning stages to see cooperation going forward. NATO's got to come to the level here and help. It is in their duty because what the United States is leading the way on is a safer world for all, not just America.
Well, before we go to break, do you think Iran has enough weapons left that they could shoot off one last round and regain control of something they've lost?
They've got about a third of their missiles left. They have thousands of drones left, and they probably have about 6,000 mines that float, mines that are underwater. And so they do still have significant capability. What they no longer have is an Air Force or a Navy, but they do have very small, fast attack boats, which we've seen in recent days and weeks, that can overcome oil tankers and others in the Strait. That is the concern, but also they still do have ballistic missile capability, as we have seen them shoot off 2 ballistic missiles to our bases in Diego Garcia weeks ago. That is a concern.
Well, Paul, we need to take a short break. Would you stand by for another segment?
My pleasure.
And if those of you watching want to jump in on this conversation, just go to ajnow.com and send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'll be right back. And we're back now with the former Naval Intelligence Commander, Paul Chabot. Let's move to Ukraine. There's a report that Ukraine had shot down hundreds of Russia's drones this week, but there's nothing new on whether a truce is possible anytime soon. Has the fact that so much of our attention has moved to Iran that it's making things more difficult for Zelensky to put an end to the war?
So right now, obviously a lot of America's attention is paid to the Middle East, but there's really 2 wars going on, as we know. And Ukraine, I think, has made incredible headway. No one would have thought years ago, I remember when this war first started, that Russia would have any trouble overcoming Ukraine, and they are. In fact, German Chancellor should have really framed Putin as being humiliated. I think that is the story, that what Ukraine has done with their drone technology, the capabilities on the battlefield is really revolutionary. And interestingly, America can learn a lot from that. But critical is that Russia may not be able to match Ukraine drone for drone going forward, because Russia got a lot of their drones and their technology coming out of Iran before we attacked Iran. So by us going after Iran, we are by default in many ways further helping Ukraine advance or at least fend off Russia. Look, Russia, for their negotiations, if you will, they are looking at potentially negotiating. At least that's what they told Trump in the last 24 hours on a 90-minute phone call. But Russia wants certain territory in the eastern bloc of Ukraine, and that's a no-go for Ukraine. So the negotiations are going to be at a standstill, at least on those terms.
Well, a lot of people thought Zelensky would have to give up, given the much smaller number of soldiers he has versus Russia. But somehow he still manages to keep Putin at bay. Is that better fighting, better equipment, or just something else?
You know, it's really honestly better technology. When you think about the resiliency of the human spirit, when you're put in a war like this, where they were looked upon as the underdog, they took this revolutionary technology of drones and advanced it on the battlefield. It is remarkable to look at their operators. Certainly they have troops on the front lines that are defending, but a lot of what they have going forward, attacking in Russia, are drones that have significant reach and capability. If you can imagine this, a lot of their operators basically sit well inside of Ukrainian territory and are monitoring one-way drones, if you will, with cameras targeting all of Russians' capabilities. Russia has changed their tactics to provide some sort of fencing over their armory. But even that we've been able to get around. And even Ukraine now is advancing forward robots, if you will, that look like miniature tanks with machine guns that have been known in the field to hold down Russian forces for 24 hours. I think it's remarkable what they're doing, a lot for the free world to learn from that technology aspect. And right now, Russia is not looking too good.
With President Trump openly criticizing NATO for its lack of response in Iran, Do you think that Putin might try to take advantage of that moving forward to Poland or deeper even inside of Ukraine?
I don't think Russia right now has the capability to go much beyond the conflict where they are. Remember, they are pulling in forces from North Korea to help them fight. They're using conscripts. They are recruiting deeper and deeper into the bench of the Russian people. And the Russians going forward to the front lines, they call it a meat grinder because they are literally getting torn down by Ukraine forces and drones and their advanced technology, which Russia is having a very difficult time adapting to. The concern, though, is that, look, Russia is still an adversary of the United States and a clear ally of Iran. And even today, Russia is sharing satellite technology with Iran. And why that is dangerous is for Iran to use the ballistic missiles, the weaponry that they have left, they're going to depend largely on that Russian shared intelligence and imagery about where U.S. forces are, where our ships are. So yes, Russia will fight the United States, not directly, but by providing intelligence and support to Iran in that method to target U.S. forces. So Russia's still very dangerous, a lot of capabilities that will quite honestly play out now and play out in the future.
Well, the question about some things a little closer to home, if Trump tries to move on Cuba, as has been suggested, do you think Russia will still have the means to jump in and help defend Cuba?
You know, that I would say as of today, no, they don't. Russia is stretched very thin. What we do know is that they sent an oil tanker to Cuba a few weeks ago. The United States initially was not going to allow that in, but we did. But that one oil tanker has not done much to sustain Cuba. Cuba is a communist nation. It is still designated as a terror sponsor state. Trump put it back on the list in 2021. We are pressuring that regime. There could potentially be collapse from within Cuba. They have rolling blackouts right now. They have food shortages, and they're losing their population. So we may not actually have to look much towards Russia to helping Cuba. We may see Cuba themselves begin to overtake their own leadership as a failed state.
Well, one last quick question. It seems to me that a truly free Cuba aligned with the U.S. would be much better strategically for us. Am I understanding that correctly?
Oh, 100%. Look, the Cubans that have fled and ended up in Florida, largely Florida, other parts of this country, they love our nation, they love what we stand for, and they came here. And they're some of the best Americans and some of the best voters because they've come from a communist nation. And they come here warning us what it is that we're up against. Cuba being 90 miles, the history with the Cuban Missile Crisis, turning over Cuba into a free nation with a people here already domestically in this country would just be a huge win, not only for the Cuban people in Cuba, but also for those here as well. I hope that is the future of Cuba, a beautiful country that has provided remarkable citizens to our nation that have been on the front lines politically and in the military, just stalwart Americans that we love.
Absolutely. I think there's almost over 3 million Cubans that have already immigrated. We can put that on our prayer list. Paul Chabot, thank you for your time today. We all look forward to a peaceful end to all these conflicts, as well as looking forward to the freedom of the citizens of all these countries involved. I hope you'll stay in touch.
Thanks. God bless you, Alan. Have a great day.
In a moment, your emails.